The streets of Gaza echo with the sounds of devastation, families forced to flee, entire neighborhoods reduced to rubble, and countless lives uprooted overnight. The war has triggered one of the most severe displacement crises in modern times, and today, we uncover the heartbreaking reality behind the headlines. Hello everyone, welcome back to the channel. In today's video, we dive deep into the unimaginable destruction unfolding in Gaza. The ongoing war has not only devastated the physical landscape, but has also shaken the very foundations of human survival. Entire families have been forced to abandon their homes, clutching whatever they can carry, while the shadow of conflict follows them wherever they go. The humanitarian cost is staggering, with countless men, women, and children facing uncertainty, hunger, and fear on a daily basis. As we walk through the details, we will uncover the layers of suffering, the displacement crisis, and the urgent need for global attention. This story is not just about buildings destroyed or statistics rising. It is about human beings caught in the crossfire of war. Every destroyed street hides a memory, every tent tells a story of loss, and every displaced person carries the weight of trauma. The devastation is not confined to infrastructure, but has seeped deep into the hearts and minds of survivors. Today, we take you on a journey through the war-torn landscape of Gaza, tracing the displacement crisis from its roots to its present reality. So stay with us as we break down the crisis in 10 sections, each shining a light on different dimensions of this tragedy, from human suffering to the global response. The first thing to understand is the scale of destruction in Gaza. Entire neighborhoods that once buzzed with life have been flattened to the ground. Homes, schools, and hospitals have turned into piles of rubble. The relentless bombings and shelling have left infrastructure in ruins, with water pipelines shattered and electricity grids destroyed. This isn't just about war damages, it's about survival stripped away. Families now walk through what used to be their living rooms, finding only fragments of walls or broken toys scattered across the dust. For children, the trauma of losing not just their homes, but also their sense of safety is overwhelming. Many of them no longer attend school because the very schools that should shelter education have been transformed into emergency shelters. When we talk about displacement, we must picture people huddled in overcrowded tents, exposed to harsh weather, relying on limited aid supplies that often don't meet even basic needs. The destruction of essential services, such as hospitals, adds another painful layer to the crisis, as injured civilians cannot access proper medical treatment. What was once a functioning society has collapsed into survival mode, with people improvising ways to fetch water, cook food, and care for the sick. And amid all this, hope hangs by a thin thread. Families cling to memories of better days while desperately searching for the strength to endure the present chaos. The devastation has not only destroyed homes, but also dismantled the very backbone of daily life. The second dimension of this tragedy is the human displacement itself. Tens of thousands of families have been uprooted, often with only a few minutes to leave their homes before the bombs fall. Imagine being told to evacuate the house where you raised your children, knowing that you may never see it again. Displacement in Gaza is not a matter of choice. It's an unavoidable consequence of survival. Entire communities are on the move, walking miles in search of relative safety, though nowhere feels truly safe under constant bombardment. The displaced population often ends up in makeshift camps or schools converted into temporary shelters, but these places are overcrowded and lack sanitation facilities. Families of 8 or 10 are crammed into one small room, sharing minimal rations with hundreds of others. Privacy disappears, and so does dignity. Mothers struggle to calm hungry children. Fathers search desperately for food or clean water, and the elderly often suffer without medical care. Displacement also tears apart the social fabric of communities. Neighbors who once relied on each other are scattered, extended families separated, and entire generations thrown into limbo. These temporary shelters are not designed for long-term living, yet for many, they have become semi-permanent homes. The weight of uncertainty crushes every displaced person, uncertain about tomorrow, uncertain about returning home, uncertain about whether life will ever return to normal. It is this uncertainty, coupled with the raw suffering of displacement, that paints one of the darkest pictures of war's human cost. The third aspect is the emotional and psychological trauma. War leaves scars that are invisible to the eye, but deeply embedded in the mind. Children in Gaza now draw pictures of tanks and bombs instead of flowers or houses. Their laughter has been replaced with cries in the night, shaken awake by nightmares of explosions. Psychologists working with displaced families report alarming levels of anxiety, depression, and post-traumatic stress disorder among civilians. For adults, the trauma is equally devastating. Parents carry immense guilt, feeling powerless to protect their children. Survivors of attacks relive the moments when they lost loved ones, and the fear of death never truly leaves them. In displacement shelters, every loud noise, even a slammed door, can trigger panic. The collective trauma is amplified by the uncertainty of the future. Will the war end? Will they return home? Will their children ever grow up in peace? These unanswered questions eat away at mental stability. For communities, the psychological toll has long-term consequences. War doesn't just kill people, it destroys confidence, hope, and mental health for generations. Even after the bombs stop falling, the emotional wounds remain open, shaping how survivors interact with each other and the world. Without proper psychological support, which is scarce under current conditions, this trauma will echo for decades. It is important to recognize that displacement is not just about losing physical space. It is about losing peace of mind, safety, and the ability to dream of a normal future. The fourth focus is the humanitarian crisis. Displacement on such a large scale creates an overwhelming demand for food, clean water, medical supplies, and shelter. Aid organizations struggle to meet these demands, often hindered by limited access or restricted supply routes. Children are the most vulnerable victims of this crisis. Malnutrition is rising, with many surviving on a single meal a day, often just bread or rice. Clean water is scarce, forcing families to drink contaminated sources, which leads to widespread diseases like diarrhea, cholera, and skin infections. Medical facilities, already destroyed or overwhelmed, cannot keep up with the growing needs of the displaced. Pregnant women, newborns, and the elderly face life-threatening challenges without adequate medical attention. Sanitation is another crisis within the crisis. Overcrowded shelters lack proper toilets, turning living conditions unhygienic and increasing the risk of disease outbreaks. Humanitarian workers warn that without immediate intervention, the crisis could spiral into famine and epidemics. Aid deliveries, when they do arrive, are often insufficient and unevenly distributed, leaving many families without essential supplies. The sight of long lines for bread or water has become tragically normal. For displaced people, survival is reduced to the most basic needs, and even those are often unmet. Beyond material needs, the humanitarian crisis also affects dignity and humanity. People who once lived normal lives with jobs, schools, and families now stand in queues for food, dependent on aid for survival. The transformation from independence to dependency is painful, stripping away pride and dignity. The fifth layer of this crisis lies in the collapse of education. Displaced children are among the most affected, as their schooling is disrupted, sometimes indefinitely. Schools that once served as centers of learning are now overcrowded shelters, with classrooms packed with families instead of students. Teachers who once inspired knowledge now struggle to manage survival. This disruption not only robs children of education, but also of stability. School is often the one place where children find routine, friendship, and hope for the future, but in Gaza, this has been stolen from them. The loss of education creates long-term consequences. A generation without proper schooling will grow up with fewer opportunities, fewer skills, and diminished hope. War robs not just the present, but also the future. For many displaced children, education is no longer even a dream. It is a forgotten luxury. International organizations attempt to provide temporary learning spaces in camps, but these are often underfunded and under-resourced. Children sit on the floor, share a few worn-out books, and learn under conditions that are far from ideal. Yet, even in these small attempts, education provides a glimmer of hope. It reminds children that their lives are more than just survival and that a future beyond war is possible. However, unless peace and stability are restored, these small efforts cannot replace the massive loss. Education is not just about books. It is about building resilience, confidence, and hope. Without it, displacement robs children of the very foundation they need to rebuild Gaza in the future. The sixth part of this discussion is about the economic devastation caused by displacement. Gaza's economy, already fragile, has collapsed under the weight of war. Businesses destroyed, markets closed, and farms abandoned have left thousands without income. For displaced families, the loss of livelihoods is immediate and crushing. Fathers and mothers who once worked to provide for their families now stand in aid lines, unable to earn. Farmers cannot reach their land, shopkeepers see their stores turn to rubble, and workers face unemployment as entire industries shut down. The destruction of infrastructure, including factories and transport routes, means economic activity grinds to a halt. Even small trades, like selling vegetables in a local market, become impossible when markets themselves are destroyed. For displaced people, this economic collapse deepens the suffering. Without money, they cannot buy food or basic supplies, even when available. Poverty spreads like wildfire, pushing families into desperation. Some parents resort to sending their children to work in unsafe conditions just to secure a little money. Others sell whatever few belongings they carried with them to survive another day. The collapse of the economy doesn't just affect individuals, it undermines the possibility of recovery. Rebuilding an economy takes years, even decades, but displacement makes it even harder. People cannot rebuild their businesses while living in tents or shelters. The destruction of livelihoods means that even after the war ends, displaced families will face a long road to recovery filled with economic hardship. The seventh element of this crisis revolves around health and healthcare systems. The war has targeted not only residential areas, but also medical infrastructure. Hospitals lie in ruins, clinics are overwhelmed, and doctors struggle to treat a flood of injured people with limited supplies. For displaced families, access to healthcare is nearly impossible. Imagine being a mother with a sick child, standing in line for hours at a clinic that has no medicine left. Imagine being an elderly person in need of regular treatment for chronic diseases, only to find hospitals closed or destroyed. Injuries from bombings, shrapnel wounds, burns, and trauma often go untreated, leading to preventable deaths. The lack of clean water and sanitation in shelters further worsens health conditions. Outbreaks of disease are common, with children especially vulnerable. Healthcare workers themselves are displaced, exhausted, and under immense psychological pressure. International medical aid, while helpful, cannot meet the overwhelming demand. Pregnant women face life-threatening risks without access to prenatal care, and many give birth in shelters without proper medical support. The destruction of the healthcare system means that even treatable conditions like infections or asthma can become deadly. For displaced populations, the loss of healthcare is not just an inconvenience, it is a matter of life and death. The healthcare collapse in Gaza reflects the broader devastation of the war, where civilians bear the heaviest burden. Without urgent global action, the health crisis among displaced families will deepen, leaving scars that last for generations. The eighth area we need to focus on is the social and cultural impact of displacement. Gaza is not just a place, it is a culture, a history, a community woven together through generations. Displacement shatters this fabric. Families are torn apart, communities scattered, and cultural traditions disrupted. Weddings, funerals, and community gatherings that once brought people together are now impossible under displacement. Cultural landmarks, mosques, and heritage sites lie in ruins, erasing the physical memory of identity. For displaced families, the loss is not just material, it is also deeply emotional. Imagine being forced to leave behind the house your grandparents built, the streets where you played as a child, or the markets that held your history. This cultural loss creates a sense of identity crisis. Displaced people often feel rootless, uncertain of where they belong. The community support that once provided resilience is now fractured, replaced by isolation and shelters. Displacement also changes gender roles and family structures. Women often bear additional burdens of caregiving in shelters, while men struggle with the loss of their role as providers. Children lose role models, and entire generations grow up disconnected from their cultural roots. The cultural devastation is harder to measure than physical destruction, but its impact is equally profound. Without community, tradition, and cultural identity, displaced families lose more than just homes. They lose the essence of belonging. Preserving culture under displacement is difficult, but it is essential for maintaining resilience and hope among survivors. The ninth dimension of the crisis involves the international response. The displacement in Gaza has drawn global attention, but the response has been mixed. Humanitarian organizations are working tirelessly to provide aid, but they face challenges such as limited access, security risks, and political restrictions. International governments issue statements of concern, but real action often falls short of what is needed. Aid pledges are made, but delivery is slow, and the needs on the ground far outweigh the assistance provided. For displaced families, international aid is a lifeline, but it is not enough to restore dignity or normalcy. They need not just food and water, but also long-term solutions that address the root causes of displacement. The international community must move beyond temporary relief and push for political solutions that bring lasting peace. However, the lack of unified global action allows the crisis to continue, leaving civilians to pay the highest price. Media coverage has raised awareness, but without sustained attention, the urgency fades and displaced families remain forgotten. International organizations also call for protection of civilians and respect for humanitarian law, but these appeals are often ignored. The gap between words and actions widens, leaving displaced people in limbo. The international response highlights a painful truth. While the world watches, displaced families continue to suffer. True solidarity requires more than aid. It requires meaningful steps toward peace and justice. Without this, displacement will remain a recurring tragedy. Finally, the 10th and most important part of this discussion is about the future. Displacement in Gaza is not just about the present crisis, it is about what comes next. Families dream of returning home, but many homes are reduced to rubble. Rebuilding will take years, perhaps decades, and the question remains, will people ever be able to return? For children, the future is even more uncertain. Will they grow up in camps, or will they have a chance to rebuild their communities? The future of Gaza depends not only on reconstruction, but also on healing. Healing from trauma, rebuilding social fabric, restoring education, and reviving the economy are all crucial for recovery. But this cannot happen without peace. Displaced families know that without a lasting solution, they may face displacement again. Their greatest wish is not just to rebuild houses, but to rebuild lives in peace. The resilience of the people is remarkable, but resilience alone cannot carry them through endless cycles of destruction. The world must recognize that behind every number is a human being with hopes, dreams, and a right to live in dignity. The future of Gaza's displaced depends on the choices made today by leaders, by international organizations, and by the global community. The tragedy of displacement is not inevitable. It can be prevented and it can be resolved, but it requires commitment, compassion, and courage. The people of Gaza deserve not just survival, but also a future where displacement is no longer their story. So, if you've made it this far, I want to thank you for watching and engaging with this crucial issue. War, devastation, and displacement are not distant problems. They are human tragedies that demand our attention. If you found this video informative, please hit the like button, share it with your friends, and subscribe to the channel for more deep dives into global crises. Most importantly, let's keep raising our voices for peace, justice, and humanity. Together, we can make a difference.